breach the enormous and quite sort of visceral divide between those who say there should be some action to reduce carbon emissions and those who are reluctant to go too hard on that. And we've seen that in this country, also seen it in the US. Barack Obama wanted a price on carbon but couldn't get that through because of his political situation. And so what have they done? And in fact, this week in Australia, we've had visiting Heather Zeikal. She was the top White House advisor on energy and climate change between 2009 and 2013. Has worked with Barack Obama on these and related issues for many a long year, in fact, much longer than that. She was due to see Greg Hunt, the Federal Environment Minister, here. And what she was bringing was a really interesting perspective on how to bridge those divides in our economy.
The United States, for 30 years, the fuel efficiency standards for our cars and trucks remained unchanged until President Obama came in and said, look, we need to improve this. It's better from an American energy security perspective. It's better from an American competitiveness perspective. And frankly, a lot of people don't want to pay as much money as they're paying to fill up their car with gas. So we worked diligently with the industry. We ultimately found a path forward, working hand in hand with industry. This doesn't have to be a combative set of discussions. I mean, there was a path forward. We were able to find it. Now, in the United States, the fuel economy standards are 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025, with incremental improvements every year out until then, which is really pretty amazing if you think about it. And the kind of technologies that we're going to be deploying to achieve those new standards are significant, creating jobs and new opportunities through innovation. But also, at the end of the day, I don't know a single driver that would oppose the notion of having a more efficient car or truck. And that's really what it comes down to. This doesn't have to be an issue about Democrats versus Republicans, the right versus the left. I mean, this is really an area that we've been able to, in the United States, find some common entrance, find some common ground, and that's going to be my message today, which is this is a huge area of opportunity. It achieves many, many different objectives, whether, if you don't want to talk about climate change, fine. Let's talk about what it achieves from an economic security perspective.
Sure. That is Heather Zeikal talking this week with Linda Mottram on Mornings, but also refreshingly taking the politics out of the whole discussion.
Well, trying to anyway, and they seem to have sort of done that, but you've got to dance around a lot still. But for the United States, of course, energy security is a huge issue, and so selling that message, the idea that, by putting some of these measures in place, yes, we're reducing carbon footprint, but we're also making America more energy secure. That, of course, not as reliant on the Middle East, for example. So obviously that's been a path forward for them. Whether we have a similar path is an interesting question.
Yeah, in the farm sector, coming to grips with this whole issue has been, we see a lot of different points of view expressed, and we see people say, it's all part of normal variation, I'm not worried about global warming and those sorts of things. But then you see on the flip side, you do see people saying, fifth-generation farmers saying it's not raining enough, it's not raining as much as it used to, it's definitely getting hotter. We've gone through all our 100-year rainfall records and temperature records, and things are changing. And it was interesting, on the back of the report this week, we heard from the Birchip Cropping Group, who was saying their view is it is changing. They're saying the head of the Birchip Cropping Group was saying they're looking to science to solve some of these issues. They're looking to adaptability, whether or not we grow certain crops in certain areas, whether we move to grazing, whether we look at how the rainfall patterns have changed. They're moving from north to south in some situations, more carbon dioxide, more heat means certain crops grow better. We need to see about with what rainfall matches it. So these are looking at science, different varieties, so that there are people that are saying there are people that have their head in the sand in the farm sector and saying it's not changing, it's not happening, it's just normal variation. But we also see some quite innovative people thinking about what is actually changing and saying how can we adapt to that.
And I think that's what I was saying. By taking the politics out of it, you actually then encourage a free conversation where different options can be brought into it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point. You know, I mean, we're doing it here where we're retrofitting buildings for energy efficiency because nobody wants to just, burn fossil fuels and pay a fortune along the lines that Heather Zyko was talking about with cars, for example. And the other thing, interestingly, they're doing in the States, though, is that they're toughening up EPA, well, not toughening up, using existing EPA legislation to say to carbon polluters, well, your carbon pollution will now come under normal EPA pollution standards. And so, other things that are more contentious, but a lot of it isn't particularly.
It's interesting because in the, 9-10 years I've been judging the President's Medal, you've seen a lot of the environmental ideas towards reduction of inputs, cropping and water particularly go from being fringe theories to very established practices with some of the key agricultural companies now putting those environmental practices into contracts with their suppliers.
Well, I remember when I first started as a rural reporter 20 years ago, they were zero-till, and people used to laugh at people that were doing zero-till, and now it's a massive movement. So, and conservation farming is a massive movement and quite mainstream. So
because it makes sense for other good reasons, economic reasons.
Absolutely. Input costs and the whole. Yeah.
Brooke.
Well, voluntary standards are always a bit of an issue, aren't they? Because whenever you've got businesses engaged in competition with others to make a profit, they're not about meeting goals that government would like but doesn't quite yet require. So always a bit of a tussle there.
And that's part of the, I think part of the idea is to make it less regulation and more voluntary implementation by the growers and the farmers. It's an interesting one. So Heather Zyko, the response to her through here was...
I'm still working on finding that out. It's not entirely out there.
Why are we so reticent to respond? That's what I find hard.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll keep pursuing it. But yes, I think it would have been a very engaging conversation.
That is Heather Zyko talking with Linda Mottram this week on ABC Radio, on 702 ABC Sydney, and on ABC Radio across New South Wales.
Well, that would have been interesting. Greg Hunt, Australia's Environment Minister, talking to the representative of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the message seems to be that the busyness men who vote the Liberal ticket are clinging really, really, really tightly to their hopes that global warming is bullshit, or absolute crap as Tony Abbott called it. Whereas the National Party, they're stuck out there in the real world, and it's the people who've got 5 generations worth of rainfall results and temperature records and cloud charts. They're the ones who are saying, well, there's nothing cyclic about this. This is not anything normal that's happening, it is a steady progressive change away from what used to be normal, and we now don't know what normal is, but it seems to be more extreme. You might get, we got 109 millimetres of rain in 10 days, whereas up there in Queensland, where they voted for Campbell Newman, the human hemorrhoid, and they believe in just-in-time delivery of everything, they got 109 millimetres in less than half a day. So, looked at from a purely numerological standpoint, we got an equal amount of water. What are they whinging about? Looking at it from their point of view, it all came too fast, too much, too heavy, all at the end, and it was more destructive than useful. If we don't get a gentle, productive climate, there won't be any environmental surplus to exploit, and if there's no environmental surplus to exploit, you can't have any economic activity. And it doesn't matter how many bloody degrees in busyness management you've got or from what university you got them from. You cannot conduct any economic activity unless there is an environmental surplus to exploit. And the National Party is in touch with reality more than the Liberal Party, and it doesn't matter what Tony Abbott says in a 3-word slogan, or if he repeats himself, or if he repeats himself, or if he repeats himself. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.